Welcome to Graceful Healing, a podcast to get straight talk about healing and living again. My name is Maureen Lake. I'm a holistic health coach, speaker, author, and thyroid disease fighter. Each week, I'll be bringing you graceful conversations to inspire you to seek new ways to hit the reset button to catapult your health and vitality to new levels. Listen in and open your heart to all the new possibilities. Are you ready? Let's do this. Lyena is an inspirational speaker, storyteller, and coach, committed to changing the way humans relate to change, challenge, and adversity, so that the difficulties we face become the catalyst for our greatness. Trust me when I tell you, you're going to be moved to tears when you hear Lyena's story. It's one of the most moving and powerful interviews I've ever done. I hope you enjoy and love her as much as I do. Good morning, everybody, and I can't wait for you to meet my guest today, Lyena. She has an unbelievable personal story and journey to share with you. And let's just get right into it, Lyena. How are you today?
Oh, I'm well. I'm really well. I feel incredibly honored to be here.
Oh, thank you. I'm honored to have you. So let's just get right down to it. Can you share with us your personal story and your journey and how you landed where you are today? Because I know my listeners are going to be flabbergasted when they hear your background, and it's so powerful.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd be happy to. It's been a rich journey, that's for sure. So obviously it all starts from the very, very beginning. You know, all of our journeys start from the beginning, but I won't go that far back. 16 years ago, in 2002, the fall of 2002, I was on a date and I was hiking in the Malibu hills of Southern California where I live. Mm-hmm. And it was very hot, and we went into an oak grove looking for some shade, and I climbed a tree. And this is something I've been doing all my life. I was in my early 30s at this point, but I grew up out in the wilds. I went backpacking out in the backwoods for the first time when I was 5.
Oh my gosh.
So, being in nature, being in the trees, climbing. I was an extremely, extremely physical person. I was a lifelong dancer. This was the most normal thing I could do. Mm-hmm. But on this particular day, from 25 feet up, a branch broke. Oh. And 1.2 seconds later, I was on the ground. The physical ramifications of that experience, of those 1.2 seconds, I had some internal injuries, all of which, were in a sense no big deal. They were horrifying at the time, but I recovered from all of them. But I also shattered my 11th vertebra in the middle of my spine, and I badly dislocated my spine, so much so that it came to lock in that dislocated position. So my spinal cord was instantly and completely crushed, which paralyzed me from the waist down. Now, I expected, because I was such an incredibly physical person, because physicality, physical expression was my essence, really. Mm-hmm. I expected paralysis to be the one thing that I could not recover from. I had had plenty of other traumas in my life by that point, but paralysis was my worst conscious fear. But in fact, that is not what happened. And it started to be not what I expected from the moment I heard the branch break, even before I hit the ground. Because in that moment, I realized that I had a choice. I had spent my life trying desperately to control, I guess, the outcome of my life is the best way to say it. I was always trying to make sure that things went in the direction I wanted them to go, that I had the kind of life that I wanted, that I was happy, that I was protected, that I was safe. As I mentioned, I had had many traumas already before that point in my life, and they had left me with this sense that, look, life is dangerous and things go badly sometimes, and I have to be vigilant and I have to be skilled and I got to be on it and make sure that bad stuff doesn't happen. So that had been my MO. And then I heard the crack and I knew instantly what was happening. And I realized that I had a choice, that I could fight to control this moment, just like I had done always in my life, or I could let go. And I chose to let go. So from the beginning, I mean, everything dropped into slow motion and this incredible peace came over me. And I started to see the world as it actually is, which is so golden and so full of life and love and beauty of God, really. And that adjustment changed everything for me.
Wow.
And so even though here I was living now my worst conscious fear, which I should mention turned out to be so much worse than I ever dreamed it would be. Like, you know, you think of paralysis, and you think, oh, you can't walk, you know, you can't move your legs. And that's devastating. Now you're in a wheelchair and you can't dance the way you used to, and you can't, you know, get into your friends' houses because they all have steps in front of them. And you know, you think of it just in terms of the mobility issues. And no doubt the mobility issues are devastating and constant, absolutely constant everywhere you go. But mobility is such a tiny part actually of what paralysis entails. So, you know, the total loss of my sexual sensation, the daily incontinence, the loss of control of both my bladder and my bowel, the organ systems that are compromised, the way that my digestion is compromised, the way that my bones are compromised, the frequency and ease with which I shatter bones in my lower body. It's so much bigger. So
people don't even stop to realize or comprehend that piece of it.
It's very, very hard to.
Yeah.
It's hard because what we see is the mobility issue. That's what's on the surface. That's what's purely visible. And that is so devastating that, I mean, truly, that is such a hard thing. And we're all afraid of that. And so it's hard to see past that. And we have no way of knowing that. So, but it's truly a much bigger picture. And so even though here, this is my worst conscious fear, and it turns out to be so much worse than I thought it was going to be, I'm in this state of astonishing grace. And everything in my life, even while I'm in rehab, you know, I spent 2 months in the hospital after that, learning to compensate for what has been stolen takes a really long time, and it's really hard work, and you're super sick for a lot of it. And it's a devastating experience.
I can't even imagine. I know living in Colorado when Amy Van Dyken had her accident and came back to Craig Hospital for her rehab, like I really watched her carefully, and it was just at times gut wrenching. It really was. I can't even imagine what you went through and the strength that you have in order to do it.
But see, that's what was so incredible, Maureen, because I didn't have that strength. It's not like, incidentally, I went to Craig Hospital. That's where I did my rehab.
Okay.
I was injured in California, and I had my initial surgery and my first 10 days of recovery here. And then I flew on a medical Learjet so that I could do my inpatient rehab at Craig. So that's exactly where I was, outside Denver. And I was not that like, you imagine this strong person. That's not who I was going in, but that's who I became in between the ground and the branch.
Jeez.
Like I was so accompanied by something so much bigger than me. And so right from the beginning, everything started to shift. Like my personal relationships, I had been plagued by chronic depression almost my whole life, and tons of anxiety, like generalized anxiety. And like that was vanishing. My depression vanished after I became paralyzed. It was the weirdest thing.
That is weird.
Yeah, it was just like, how is that possible?
Right.
When I got out of the hospital, I had already these amazing stories to tell. And I was an actor. I was a semi-professional actor. I was a founding member of a very well-respected theater company in Los Angeles, but I was making $300 a year as an actor. I was, not known outside my city at all. And when I got out of the hospital, I suddenly was utterly compelled to start telling these stories. And theater is what I knew, so that's what I did. I put together, my own stories in a very rough edit and called 100 people together and said, I'm going to do this on the stage. And that became a one-woman show that ended up doing 5 national tours. And I mean, just my sense of purpose, my confidence, my insight and wisdom and clarity, my mental health, and my personal relationships all improved, not in spite of paralysis, but because of it.
That's amazing. That really
It was pretty shocking, I have to say. I mean, even for me, like nobody was more surprised than I was.
So
nobody.
Just out of curiosity, what was the name of your show? And are you going to go on the road again?
Yeah, the show is called Caterpillar Soup.
Great name.
Yeah. And it's that metaphor of the caterpillar to the butterfly was extremely present in my life. I don't know if you know, but Craig Hospital, at least at that time, all of the ceilings are painted with butterflies.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so that when they wheel you in on your gurney, that's what you see.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea. I just hear amazing stories about that hospital. But I didn't know that.
Craig is truly extraordinary. So that metaphor and specifically the moment of metamorphosis inside the cocoon, because the caterpillar has to dissolve. Mm-hmm. It's not that it forms wings on the body that it has. It has to lose everything it's known itself to be in order to become this next thing. Mm-hmm. That's what I discovered, is that's true for us too. And it's the hardest thing, because you have to let go of who you've been before you know who you're becoming. Mm-hmm. So the show's called Caterpillar Soup. It opened in 2004 in Santa Monica, California. We ended up running for 6 months. We were supposed to run for 3 weeks. Yeah, we extended 5 times because we got huge critical praise, which I wasn't expecting, because it was this tiny little theater and I wasn't expecting press to show up at all, actually. But audiences just kept coming back. People were coming 3 and 4 times to see the show. So we kept it running. And then I started touring nationally about a year later. The last national tour that we did was in the spring of 2011 after I gave birth to my son.
Oh,
so
that's amazing.
That's very much part of all the gold that my life became, because I was on this date, remember, when I fell. And it was someone I'd known, I'd been friends with for a couple of years, but only been dating for about 2 months. And I ended up marrying him.
I was wondering.
Yeah.
I was rooting for you two.
Yeah, we got married in 2006 and I gave birth to our son in 2010.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So the show toured, we did 5 national tours, but after I had Aiden, I was like, I can't be on the road with a baby. This is with a baby and a major disability. It was too much. So I do think that the show will come back, but I couldn't tell you when right now.
So how old is Aiden now?
He just turned 8 back in October.
Oh gosh, what a fun age. And then you've done TED Talks too, right?
I haven't done a TED Talk yet. It's funny you should mention that, because I'm actually prepping my TED Talk right now. I have always thought, I've been told for years, you should do a TED Talk, you should do a TED Talk. And when I first heard that, I really had still no great vision for the impact of my story. Like I just hadn't lived with it long enough to see what it was doing for people. And 5 years of touring will really let you see that. So I've been saying for years, I really want to do a TED Talk, and have decided that, okay, it's time to actually commit to that and get it written. So what I have done is a SUE Talk, which is an organization that is reasonably new, stands for, let's see if I can get this right. It's Successful, Unstoppable, Empowering Women. I always want to say uppity for the U. I have to really pause.
Yeah, really.
Don't misrepresent these people. No, Successful, Unstoppable, Empowering Women. And it's specifically in a business context. So it's a TED style talk. It's in the sense of, the amount of time that you have up on stage, but they're really looking at your wisdom as it applies to being in business. So that's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you sure fit that category. That's for sure.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Well, it's just incredible. What were you doing? Like, what was your life like before your accident? I know you were a dancer and trying to do some acting, but I shouldn't say trying to. You were doing some acting, but it wasn't paying the bills, basically, is what I'm getting at. So I was just curious how your life changed in that way, too.
Yeah, it's funny. If you look at my life then, there were definitely successes in my life. I mean, as I said, we had the very, very well-respected theater company. We were getting fantastic reviews. We were doing very unique, original work. But in many ways, my life was kind of limping along. Mm-hmm. I was a serial monogamist relationship-wise, at 2 to 4 years. That was kind of my max. I couldn't really get it together. And it was usually me leaving, but not always. I just couldn't find my way. I mean, honestly, intimacy for me, people have often said, "Oh, you were so brave." I've trekked the rainforest in Bali by myself, and I moved to Europe after I graduated college, and based on a whim, basically, and lived there for a year and a half. And so people sometimes look at my life and they think, "Oh, you're so brave," and I think, those just weren't the things I was afraid of. Like marriage, family, those were the things that I was really afraid of. That's where, in my experience, that's where the real damage happens. So, I couldn't get the whole relationship thing together. Right before my accident, my injury, I had gone through a very, very painful breakup with someone I'd been in and out of relationship with for 15 years. Mm-hmm. And that was a devastating blow. So I was really having a hard time. And I was technically homeless. I was living with friends because I had been asked to leave the house that he and I shared. And so my life was kind of a mess. Mm-hmm. I had no real pathway to the career that I wanted, the income that I hoped for, the family that maybe someday I could be brave enough to have. I didn't have access to any of those things. Mm-hmm. And I was, maybe not surprisingly, frequently depressed and afraid of life, of living, of letting life have a say in how things went and where they went. I didn't want to leave anything to chance or to fate. I wanted to map it all out and have it go exactly my way, mm-hmm. or I wasn't going to do it. And consequently, I wasn't doing much.
And wow, did you ever get thrown a curveball? Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Best curveball that ever could have happened to me.
Wow. I just have to ask, because your mindset is like something to strive for. Seriously. I know your accident helped shape it, but was there any other key things that happened that helped? I mean, your positivity is just like radiant, even through like my microphone, I can feel it.
Well, I will say that the journey that began with my fall was absolutely full of lessons and rewrites. And, it was constant. It was absolutely constant. But what I teach today has to do with the fact that all of these challenges that we face, there's no human that escapes mm-hmm. facing challenges. It's not possible. And obviously one human to the next, those challenges look different. They're not the same things, but none of us escaped right. without that. So, and I've always thought of challenges, or I had always thought of challenges as like, these are the things that hurt us. They're the things that scare us, and they cause tremendous pain. Sometimes they, turn our lives upside down. And they feel like limiters. We experience them as limiters, as something that gets in the way of our progress, of something that now we have to deal with these wounds. We have to heal. We have to, mm-hmm. do all this stuff. And to my total shock, what I discovered was that it's not the nature of the challenge that dictates its impact on your life. It's the nature of the relationship that you're having with that challenge. And if we approach our challenges in the typical ways, first of all, as an adversarial situation, like beat it or be beaten by it. Mm-hmm. If we run, if we hide, these are the things that we typically do. If we just put our heads down and bear it until it goes away. Mm-hmm. Although we may survive our challenge based on those approaches. What we will not do is become more than we were before. And every one of those challenges that we face, that anyone faces at any time in their life, is carrying with it this opportunity to become more than you've ever been. But in order to access that, we have to take a more relational approach. We have to get curious. Like, what is here for us? It doesn't mean it's not going to hurt. It doesn't mean it's not going to scare us. It is going to hurt. It is going to scare us. It is going to turn life upside down. This is not some sort of panacea like, okay, if you just look at it this way, nothing's ever going to hurt you. Mm-hmm. It's supposed to hurt. Like, we're human. That's like, if it's not hurting, we're checked out. We're not connected. So it's supposed to hurt. That's normal. That's appropriate. But it doesn't have to only hurt. But we have to change how we approach it. We have to change the relationship that we're having with it. So once I started doing that, and I started doing that without consciousness, I had to go back and look at, what the hell have I been doing? How is this going so well? I don't understand. But once I started to deconstruct, what had I been doing? That was the crux of it. I had gotten curious about this experience. I had opened myself and said, what do you have for me? What can I learn here? What can I find in each of these little moments? And that changed everything. It changed everything. Because all this beauty, all this grace, all this glory, all this wisdom, all this insight, it was all buried in there. I just had to go looking for it.
It's beautiful. You're bringing tears to my eyes, I have to admit.
And that has stayed with me. Like, that approach, I call that the Shiro's way, and it's something that I teach. That is how I live my life. Like, this is a life philosophy. It's not just how I approach my challenges, it's how I approach everything, but it's definitely how I approach my challenges. And that makes those challenges, as hard as they are, as uncomfortable, as miserable at times as they are. I mean, paralysis even, like, there's not a day that goes by that I don't ache for what I've lost. Mm-hmm. I still feel that. I feel that to my bones. And it's always, always uplifting me. It's always bringing me forward. It's always giving me gifts.
That's really amazing. It's amazing just to hear you speak that way. It's so powerful.
Thank you.
So what are you doing now? I mean, obviously you must help other people. I mean, if you're not, I'm going to
You got some words for me.
Yeah, huh? Exactly.
I do help other people. I think in several different ways. I hope all of what I'm doing is helping people. So although I don't perform the show anymore, I do still speak. I speak all around the country, and I speak to very, very diverse groups. I speak to schools and universities and future healthcare providers. I speak to spiritual communities and businesses and companies, and I share these stories. And I hope, my intention is to start to shift the way that we as a species view adversity, mm-hmm. so that we can begin to change that relationship. It's because challenge is inevitable, and because we live in really challenging times. Aside from our personal challenges, if you look at the challenges we face communally and globally, they're big.
Yeah.
These are big problems. They don't have simple solutions. They're not going to be solved by a singular person. Like, we have to elevate what we're bringing to the table in order to get ourselves out of these situations and really make lasting change. So in order to do that, we have to be able to use our challenges as catalysts. We have to be able, because we can't, it's not like you can get out of the challenge and then figure out how to solve all these problems. Like, you can't, the challenge is here, we're in it.
It doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't. It does not at all. And thankfully, because if it worked that way, we'd be totally screwed.
Yeah, that's true.
So thankfully, the answers that we need, the elevation that we need, the evolution that we need, the gateway to all of that is actually inside the challenges that we're facing personally, communally, and globally. Mm-hmm. So I speak everywhere that will let me speak, so that I can start to shift our consciousness in that direction and inspire people to look at their own challenges in a new way, to look at themselves in a new way, and to have access to all the good that's buried inside these really difficult situations. And in addition to speaking, I also coach. I mentor individuals. I do retreats, private retreats, and one-on-one coaching to help people navigate that change, that particular shift in consciousness. During the years that I was touring, I was all over the country. I did the show. I toured 3 times in Alaska, and we toured several times in Vermont. So, and lots of places in between. So I had this opportunity to meet just hundreds of people from so many different parts of the country, different types of lives. And I saw a lot of people in pain. Mm-hmm. And I heard a lot of stories of the personal struggles and also the communal struggles in some cases that people were experiencing. And it started to become really clear to me that I know the road. I understand the path from caterpillar to butterfly. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter what's brought you to that road. The metamorphosis, the components of metamorphosis are going to be the same. And it started to really pain me that people were sort of groping around in the dark, that they were in these cocoons and they were dissolving, and it was terrifying. And even if they had some sense that wings were coming, they had no idea what was happening to them or how to move through it mm-hmm. in a way that wasn't just excruciating. Mm-hmm. And I thought, but I do know. And so I started a coaching practice. So mostly so that I could be a lantern bearer, because I can't go through it for anyone, but I can hold up a light. I can say, this is what's happening to you. Mm-hmm. This is the stage you're in. This is what you can expect from it. This is what will help you move through it faster and less painfully. This is what will come next. And I can be a companion along that road.
That's amazing, because I can't even imagine how lonely that process is.
Oh,
I mean, I can't.
That's exactly the word for it. I know, because that's what it was like for me when I went through it. And I'm so grateful that I had spirit. I wasn't really alone. And it's lonely. It's terrifying. Mm-hmm. Again, because you're letting go of what you know before you know what you're becoming. Mm-hmm. So it's an act of pure faith that you're going to become anything.
Right.
That you're going to become anything worthwhile, that you're going to become, it's impossible in that moment to imagine that what you're becoming could be even a teensy bit better than what you've been. Like, all you want to do is get back to good. That's the most natural instinct in that moment, is like, just get me back to good. And I had that too. I was going to be the case who recovered. There's no documentation anywhere in the world of anyone recovering from a spinal injury as severe as mine is. Hmm. And I was like, okay, that's all right. I'll be the first. I'm okay with that. No problem. I was determined, and, being a good metaphysical practitioner and student, I was like, all right, I'm going to have the right thoughts, and I'm going to have the right feelings, and I'm going to have perfect faith, and I'm going to do all the right things, and I'm going to be the one. Mm-hmm. And that lasted about 2 weeks. I was an absolute model patient during that time, but I couldn't, like, that approach honestly made me physically ill. I became sicker and sicker and sicker doing that approach, because the force of my will was cutting off my life force. And that became evident. It was like, holy shit, I'm literally going to die if I try to continue to do it this way. And I don't know another way, but I can't be like this. And I realized that whatever my intentions for recovery, I didn't have to abandon those intentions, but I had to allow myself an authentic journey. Mm-hmm. I had to get real and truthful about my each individual moment. So I had to be scared when I was scared. I had to be furious when I was furious. I had to have it out with God. I had to cry. I had to ache. I had to be truthful about all of that and not pretend that that wasn't happening.
How wonderful that you could do that.
Oh, it was real. I was in the hospital when I made this realization. I was still there. I was so sick. And I had to do one of the most difficult and strong, talk about strength, man. I had to tell my team, all the doctors and therapists and technicians that were working with me, that they had to wait for me, that I was not ready. And I refused all of my therapies. I refused to leave my room for 3 solid days. And I spent those days screaming into my pillow and sobbing and railing at God and doubled over in the agony of my loss, the emotional pain of it. And I made them wait. And they were like, your insurance company is not happy about this. Like, we are not doing anything with you. And I was like, too bad, because I have to do this first or I can't do anything else. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the 3 days, I was, obviously still in pain. It's not like, oh, now I'm done. No more grief. But I was ready. And I went back to my therapy.
It's just amazing that you were able to know that about yourself and verbalize it and make it happen.
Yeah, gosh. I'm very, very lucky that I was already, in my early 30s at the time of my accident. I was in the hospital with a lot of guys that were, 18, 21. These kids didn't know each other, didn't know themselves yet.
Mm-hmm. True.
They just hadn't had enough time on the planet. I had already a deeply experienced spiritual practice. I had already a very clear sense of myself. I had already a decade of therapy under my belt. Mm-hmm. I had all of these tools that really positioned me. And then I had the extraordinary spiritual experience of the fall itself and this connection to spirit that, was deeper and grander than anything I had had before, despite my long time spiritual practice. So I had all of this lined up behind me. Amazing. And it made it possible. And it made it, this makes me cry. That's why I've always felt so compelled to share, whether I'm telling a story on stage in my show or I'm speaking or I'm coaching, because I feel like this was given to me. This insight, this clarity, this wisdom, this experience was given to me. Like, you have the tools. You can tell this story, because I'm not special in any other way. Like, people sometimes hear my story or they see me on stage and the most tragic thing happens. They get to the end and they say, wow, she's amazing. I could never do that. And it's not true. I would have thought that about myself. I mean, if you had asked me before I fell, could you have recovered from this particular thing? I would have sworn to you there was no way. There was no way. And I would have been dead wrong.
Yeah.
So I'm absolutely certain that when people see me and they have that response, that they're wrong. We simply underestimate ourselves. We have no idea what we're capable of.
Mm-hmm. That is so true. So true.
And I really feel like I had the right set of tools and skills that I could see something through this experience that maybe others couldn't. And have the ability to talk about it in a way that moves people, that transforms people. And that's all God given. That is, I'm just the vehicle. I'm just the vessel for that. But I that's what compels me. That's what compels me to give it.
Well, you're truly a gift. That's what you are. You're a gift to so many people. It's amazing. I always end my podcast with this one sentence, but it seems so silly to ask it of you, because I think you've already answered it in so many different ways and so many beautiful, articulate stories. But if you could go back in time and tell your younger self a piece of advice, knowing what you know now in your life, is there anything I can't even imagine there's anything you'd tell your younger self by your outcome. I mean, it's a beautiful question. And I've heard it before. And when I saw that we were going to talk about this, I thought, that's the hardest question for me.
And I'll tell you why. Because as painful as my early life was, I recognize that every one of those experiences were these really important seeds for this tree or this flower, this person that I became. And I could not have done, not only could I not have done anything I'm doing now without that, but I couldn't have done anything differently then. That was like the way it had to go. That's what I was capable of. That is what my consciousness and my spirit and my cognition was capable of. So it always feels a little bit like, what could I possibly say? But I really thought deeply about this question. I don't know, something about you inspired me to really think deeply, like, okay, put all that aside for a second. What would you say? And I think what I really would have loved when I was younger was, we were talking about companionship. I would have loved exquisite companionship. And what I would say to that younger self is, go outside, turn your face to the sun, feel the ground under your feet, and smell whatever's in the air. This is God, and she can't leave you because you are her and she is you. Now lean into that. That's what I would say.
And I have no words. I need a Kleenex. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for this interview. I just want to wrap it up because it's just so beautiful the way you ended it. And I cannot tell you how much this means to me to have this half hour of your time.
It has truly been my pleasure. Thank you for giving me another opportunity to share.
You bet. And we'll talk soon. Hey, thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. If you can, take a moment and give us a review. And please join the VIP room in Facebook for more discussion and insights. You can find us at Graceful Healing Podcast VIP room. See you there and see you next time.